Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, now I have to press play, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I wonder if it recorded yesterday. I bet it didn't record. Is the light on? Yeah, light's on. Okay.
Should we close the door, maybe?
Yeah. I'll close it. I'll close it. Testing. Yeah, okay, that's working good. Okay. So, tell me what your earliest memory is.
Well, my earliest memory is school in Crossgar, living with Margaret O'Hara, which in those days I called her Granny, and I lived with her until I was 8 years old. We lived right in Killalay Street, Crossgar, and after she passed on, then I moved out to, I think they were cousins of her son that lived in Downpatrick, and then I moved out to Molly and Paddy's place outside Downpatrick and lived with him for about a year, and then he went to England, or he was working in England, and he was supposed to get accommodations for me according to the social service department, and apparently they checked the home out and it wasn't up to their standard, so he said that then I had to go into the orphanage, and that was in outside Hollymount in Belfast. It was a mixed orphanage, boys and girls, and he did come back about 6 months later and visit me, and then he said he'd be back again, but that never materialized because I'm just assuming that it wasn't up to the criteria that the social service department wanted, because they already had 2 children, a little boy and I think it was a little girl, the second one. And then people by the name of Lavery, they had taken me out, and I was with them for almost a year, and they had a little boy and girl, were a little bit younger than me, and then an addition came along in the family, and then I had to go back to the orphanage, but I couldn't go back to the Hollymount orphanage because of scarlet fever. Then I went to the De La Salle brothers, and I was about a year to the day with the De La Salle brothers. That's why I often comment on how coincidental dates are. Then the Fitzpatricks had taken me out, and I spent 12 years on the farm with the Fitzpatricks, and in 1956 I came out of the orphanage, and in 1967 I emigrated to Canada, right out to British Columbia, and then I started from there, kind of worked my way into operating experience, operating heavy equipment, and also mechanicking.
So tell me what your memories were like living with Granny O'Hara.
Well, they were good memories, but when I tell my story about the little thatched house we lived in, it was rat infested, and they ran over the bed at night. I remember that quite clearly. And Granny O'Hara had epilepsy, and during probably a couple of 3 times a week during the night she would get into an epileptic fit, which I remember quite clearly. But as much as people would say, well, that's very dangerous having a little child along with a person with epilepsy, but I was so used to it that I didn't know any different. But I did know, I remember quite clearly, never to be close to her hands, because even back then I was warned about the grip that epilepsy can have when they have an epileptic fit, But I got quite used to it, and she was very kind. She was bedridden. I used to have to look after her quite intensively, probably. Well, once a month the priest would come around, and I used to have to wash her feet and her hands and her face and whatnot when she'd be bed-tied, and she would get communion once a month, and he would come around. And even back then, because of our financial situation. The parish priest used to buy me a pair of boots every year. But of course, being a little nipper, they would only last 2 or 3 months, and then the next thing, the soles would be out of them. And when Granny passed on, like I had stated earlier, her brother that was working, her son that worked in England.
Excuse me. Tell me about when she died.
Well, I used to come home from school every day at lunchtime. That was my break. I was only from here to that house away from the home place. And she was, like I say, she was bedridden, and I would come in and jump up in the bed and hug her and give her a kiss, and then have my lunch and go back to school. And this day I came in and I jumped up in the bed and hugged her, and she didn't respond. And I shouted at her and whatnot, but she had passed away. I do remember quite clearly her body being cold, so she had more or less passed away from I had went to school in the morning until I got home at noontime.
Are you coming with us?
I don't know yet. Are Annie and Humphrey coming? No.
They're going to meet Jared, and we're all going to meet up at 3:30 at Kerrygard.
Okay. Well, I won't come with you then.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
So you'll just.
I'd like to meet Roisin though. You're in a hurry to get going.
No. But we're going to meet Roisin and all of them at 3:30 at Kerrygard.
And you're going to make up your mind
Oh.
whether you're coming.
Yeah.
Okay, I won't come.
Okay.
Okay, no.
All right then.
Okay.
Okay.
See you in the bar.
See you soon. Okay.
All right.
Bye. Safe trip.
No, you stay here then.
But
Okay.
yeah, after, like I had said, times with her, like I used to have to go to the store and get her, like she even, back then, she used to use the snus, or what did they call it? I think it was snus you called it anyway, a little tobacco tin or
Oh, the
whatever.
snuff.
Snuff, that's what it was, yeah. And in fact, I remember the coupons that you got after the war for groceries and stuff, sugar and tea, you'd have so many coupons. And used to gather sticks for the fire, and those type of chores, because like I say, she was probably I would say almost 60% of the time she was quite bedridden, and then she'd get bouts that she'd be up quite steady.
Now, was it just the two of you living there, or
Just the two of us.
no? So just you from when you were a baby with her? Like no, not her son. Nobody else lived with you.
No adults. None,
Really?
None at all. No.
And what have you learnt about what hospital you were born at?
Well, I learned that I was born, even back then at 6 or 7 years old, I was born in Belfast. But the hospital didn't come in till later in my teens that I found out it was the juvenile hospital in Belfast.
Juvenile hospital.
Juvenile, yeah.
And do you know the details of how you were adopted by Mrs. O'Hara? I mean, you found this out much later, but
Yeah, I found how it came about. It was an ad in the paper, a little boy looking for home,
See you, Phil. All the best.
and the ad was answered by Margaret O'Hara,
oh, so who put the ad in the paper?
my mum.
Oh, that's what she always told us that
Yeah.
she did.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the agency or anything.
No.
It was a very informal form of adoption.
That is correct, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
But the agency knew of the adoption.
Ah.
They had it on record.
And which agency would that be?
That was the Social Service Department in Belfast, which I found out when Mary was the one that went to pursue the agency to see where my date of birth, or where I was born, and looking for my mom's
Yeah.
whereabouts and my dad and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then she came to the door, and Annie was with her, which Mom had told me. I didn't know this until I met Mom. And she was actually quite upset when Mrs. O'Hara had said to her, well, what can I do with the baby? I thought there was a little guy about 6 or 7 or 8 years old that was going to be able to bring in sticks and light the fire and go to the store for me and whatnot. And Mom, she said she broke down and was very emotional. And then Mrs. O'Hara says, well, I'll take him anyway. So that's basically, and that's from Mom's own words, yeah. And Annie stuck by her at the time. She was her
Confidant.
confidant at the time, which she was very fortunate. She said that she had her, because without her she wouldn't have made it through the whole emotional state that she was in at the time.
Right.
Yep.
So then, Granny O'Hara would have died, what, in 52?
58, yeah, 44 and 8, yes, that's correct, 52.
And so then, and you were 8 years old. And then, where did you go after she? Oh, you went. Her son took you in, did he?
Her son took me in, and he had a little cottage, a little one-bedroom cottage away out in the country, outside Holly Mount, which is outside Newton Ards, or would it correct me now? Holly Mount, outside Newcastle. It's off the Newcastle road, on the main road from Downpatrick to Newcastle. You more or less swing off to the right.
Right. And Mrs. O'Hara, where was her? She had a small farm, did she?
No, Miss O'Hara had nothing at all. Just she lived in, in fact, to my knowledge, the little house that she lived in, it was like a little duplex. There was a neighbour lived next door, a little thatched house, and I think that was the home belonged to the Einans. So I think she paid rent, or her pension took care of the rent, or whatever.
And was it in a town or in a village?
Right, Killalay Street, Crossgar.
Crossgar.
Right in the middle of up Killalay Street, coming from the main Belfast Road. You go up and you're heading up the street towards Killalay. No.
So Crossgar, is that the name of the town?
Correct.
I see. Crossgar.
That's correct.
I see. So she lived. So you weren't in the country, even though you were gathering sticks and it was thatched. It was,
there was
sort of built up around there.
Well, there was a fireplace, and that's what heated the home.
I see. That's what heated the home.
Yeah,
I see.
yeah.
So it's pretty primitive.
Yes.
But back in the 40s, that's how a lot of people lived.
Oh, for sure. And you gathered those whin sticks and whatnot, and you would have, the back door would be just heaped with whin sticks, and then there was coals. If she could afford a bag of coal every month, then that would be added with the sticks so that the fire would actually last longer.
Right.
The sticks was
and
more
so then
for-
you lived with her son for about a year, but
close to a year, and then he was supposed to get the confirmation from the social service that the home was up to standard. That didn't materialize, but when he went to England and took his wife, they had to put me in the home. They couldn't just automatically take me there.
Oh.
So then when they came back to visit me, he told me that he'd be back, but I didn't find out this later that the home standards wasn't up to snuff. I guess the home wasn't big enough.
Was this in England or in Ireland?
In England.
In England,
yeah.
I see.
Yeah, he was. In fact, I don't remember what his occupation was. I don't really remember.
Yeah.
If I was to guess, I would think he was just a labourer, because I don't recall him anything professional around him when I lived with him.
So just to get this straight, you left Granny O'Hara's after she died.
Yes.
So you went to what was the son's name?
Paddy O'Hara.
Paddy O'Hara.
Yeah.
And you actually lived with him for a year?
Not quite a year.
Not quite a year.
Yeah.
And then he was moving to England.
Yes, he was working in England.
He was working in England.
Yeah.
Oh, but was his wife and
his wife and baby boy was that I lived with while he was gone.
yeah, in Crossgar.
Yeah, no, outside Downpatrick.
Oh, outside Downpatrick.
Yes.
That's right. And it was a farm.
No, it was a little cottage out up a lane in the field, which they were renting.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
And then he was going to take you to England with him.
That's correct.
And then he couldn't because the house didn't pass
The
test.
standards of the social service people.
Right.
Yeah.
So what home did you go into then?
Then I went into, I'm not 100% sure the actual name of it, but it was in Hollymount outside Belfast.
Right.
And it was a mixed home, boys and girls. And then I was in there probably not any more than 8 months or so, when the people by the name of Lavery's, that were actually fairly close in the countryside they lived. He had a cottage, and I think he had probably about an acre plot. He didn't have any livestock or whatever. But I used to make up cement blocks after school at night. I'd make a half a dozen every night, and then on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, I'd work all day making these cement blocks, and then I'd stack them all, and then he was a lorry driver. So I think he
You were
sold.
only about 10.
That's correct. Yeah. But I was tough. Yeah. But I would make the cement blocks, and then when he would get anywhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 dozen made, then he would put them in the lorry, and to my knowledge that he was selling them, They were actually building blocks, you know,
Really?
the
Yeah.
cement building blocks for
And were you
building
going to
houses.
school during the day?
Going to school during the day, yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And how long did you stay over Lavery's?
A little shy of a year, and there was another baby on the way, and when that baby, and my recollection too is he was a bit of a heavy drinker, and I remember a couple of arguments, and said, well, he's gone, he's not going to be here, and because she knew how important that I was to him, making these cement blocks every night and whatnot. So anyway, what happened after that, after the new baby was on the way, or quite close to it being born, then I had to go back to the orphanage. When I went back to the orphanage in Hollymount, there was scarlet fever had broken out, so I couldn't go there. Then I was shipped to the De La Salle brothers in Kirkcudbright, which is outside Newton Arts. And I spent a year to the day there. And
What was it like there?
it was
Was it all boys?
It was all boys, and very, very strict.
The De La Salle brothers?
Very strict.
Did they wear the long
Gowns with the collars, the white collars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Long black gowns?
Yes, that's correct. And the little bishop hat, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Yeah, those little round caps.
That's right,
Yes.
with a little tassel on it. Yeah. And there was one of them was the farmer. The other one was two other ones were teachers, and then there was old brother Selba. He was more or less retired, but he would take 10 or 12 kids down to the ocean in Strangford Lough, and we'd go there on Sunday afternoon. And I remember clearly him always saying when we go past the graveyard, he had a little poem, was remember a man as you pass by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, as you will be. Remember a man and pray for me. And we used to have to rhyme that going past the graveyard all the time, because that's just the nature of Brother Selba. You know.
So were you happy there, or were you unhappy? You say it was very strict.
It was strict. I was kind of very fortunate that nothing ever happened to me, but there was a lot of child abuse going on. Flogging was still very much in play with the cat and nine tails. I remember boys screaming at night when they were being flogged.
And why would they be flogged? For doing what?
Disobedience, going out of bounds, other types of disobedience, giving back cheek. And I remember in class boys literally spitting in the brother's face whenever they were trying to chastise them, and then they would take them outside the classroom and make them stand there for hours on end, or sometimes maybe the whole day before they were allowed back to the dorm or whatever. But it was...
And why would the boys be spitting?
Just because there were young boys that came from broken homes and were, you know, hard to deal with, and the only way they knew was to be, you know, they were angry, they would kick and spit, and even when they were chastised and even sometimes flogged, it didn't correct it. It still came back. 2 days or a week later, they might get into an angry fit again and do exactly the same. And 2 to 3 times I remember boys being flogged and never seeing them again. That I could not tell what happened, because, you know, you never knew if somebody disappeared or whatever. One of the biggest catastrophes I remember was all the keys of the home were all hid. They disappeared. And there was one boy that had done it all. And nobody knew that it was one of the boys. And then I think for about 3 or 4 days, we had to write lines, I must tell the truth. And that's all we done all day long, just write, I must tell the truth. Just line after line after line. Finally, after the 3rd day, he did own up that he was the one. But he was never seen again. So whether he went to what you call a Bostel home or whatever, that's all I could remember about it. Because that name rings in the back of my head. If they couldn't keep them under control with the De La Salle brothers, they'd go to another place that would...
More like a reformatory, probably.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But then I think that the ones that got the bad flogging now, whether... and I know once I remember children getting into convulsions because they weren't fit to handle the cat and nine tails, and then doctors would be brought in, and I think maybe on my memory of the 2 or 3 that disappeared, I think that they probably were hospitalized, and then they had to maybe go to another home to be taken care of. Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah.
But I did, a year ago, I got on the internet and I got to the De La Salle brothers page there, and some awful gruesome stories, which I was suspicious at the time with 1 or 2 of the brothers. I, excuse me, I kind of sensed that, even as a young boy, that something was going on, because there seemed to be favourites and whatnot, and that's probably where the abuse was taking place.
So you think there's probably sexual abuse as
Oh,
well?
most definitely. Well, the information that we got on, there's been so many lawsuits on it, and the names just came right back. It's funny that I only know one little guy. His name was Murphy, and he had a bit of a hunchback. And the reason I guess I remember his name so clearly was he was taunted all the time about looking like a monkey, And but all the other boys in the home, I don't remember a name, which is kind of strange in a sense, because I was old enough to have a strong enough memory. But
You would have been, how old would you have been when you were there?
well, when I left there, I was 11.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but you were there for how long at the De La Salle?
1 year
1
to
year
the
to the
day.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 10 to
55, I went in there, and 56 in November, 8th of November 55 I went in, the 8th of November 56 I left, and I came to Fitzpatrick's.
And now, and they didn't adopt you, but they decided to take
No,
you in, or what was it? What was the situation?
They wanted a young fella to do work,
Yeah.
and that was their philosophy. In other words, a little farmhand.
Yeah.
And you work for your keep, more or less. But at the same...
Did you go to school when you were with them?
I went to school till I was 13. And the last year I was at school, I was basically kept at home. I think there was anywhere in the neighbourhood of 8 or 9 fines for not sending me to school, but I was more important at home because of the hands on my back were a bonus to the farm.
And what was the name of that family again? The
Fitzpatrick's.
Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
And what was it? Husband, wife? Did they have children?
No, the mother was a widow,
Yeah.
and she had 3 sons and 2 daughters. And at home, one son was in New Zealand, one daughter was married, and the other 3 children were basically at home. When I came to them, they would have been in their late 30s to maybe late 30s, 40 to mid 40s, all 3 of them.
Oh, and then she would have been what?
And she was in her 70s, mid 70s when I went there.
And what was she like?
She was very, very militant, very strong minded, and there was no messing around. No such thing as ever sleeping in.
And they'd hire an 11-year-old boy
That's correct.
to do all the work.
That's correct.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you were in school for how long did you say there? Till you were...
Till I was 13.
Yeah.
And then I left school. I came out of the primary and I went to the what did they call it? The Armagh Road. It was where you go from primary to secondary, right? Yeah, I just
Yes.
went to secondary school.
Yeah.
Just a little shy of a year.
Yeah.
Or actually a little bit over a year, that's to be correct. And then I left, and like I say, I left when I was in grade 6. And the rest.
And after that, what would your days be like? What time would you get up, and what would your days be like?
5:36 in the morning for milking. You do all the milking, and milking was done by hand for probably 3-4 years till we became a little more modern when the milking machine came in. We had our own generator, so we were kind of uppity farm people because we had lights at night, and then we would put the lights out to save the fuel on the generator around 9 o'clock, and then we would use the hurricane lamp or the Tilly lamp. But farming was anywhere from 5:36 in the morning till 10, 11 at night. There was no such thing as days off or or anything of that. It was 7 days a week.
And where was their farm?
Their farm was outside Warren Point. It's called Acavilla,
How do you spell that?
Aughavilla.
Was that
And
the
it's
name
up
of
in the
the,
country.
of the
It's
house, or the name of the farm, or the name of the village, or what?
The name of the townland area.
Townland
yeah,
area.
yeah.
I see. And how many acres did they have?
They had over probably 90 acres of arable land, and then they had about 70 acres of a mountain where lots of heather and grass on it, and we had about 225 sheep. And at the time, the early stages of my life with them, we probably would have maybe 30, 40 pigs. We'd have maybe 3 or 4 sows and a boar, and then we'd have all the litters, and then when they got old enough, they would be sold. And milking cows, I think we had about 14 or 15 milking cows. And then the dry stock, young heifers and bullocks, I think we had about 40 of them. And they were kind of, and we still, as much as we had lots of land, they still leased land year round from different parts of the country.
And where would you sleep? Where would
I had
you
my
live?
own room just off the living room. Yeah.
And did you feel like you were part of the family? I guess you were so much older than you.
Well, I did and I didn't. I always struggled with not really being part of the family because of never having any money, and
They didn't pay you. It was just
No,
room and board.
that's right. But they were supposed to, according to the social service, they came around once every year, and then they would quiz me right after I left school because I was supposed to be getting so many pound a week, and it was to be put into an account. And anyway, that account supposedly was there until I was coming to Canada. Well, actually, prior to each visit with the social service people, I would lie whenever they say, "Well, you're being paid." I said, "Oh yeah," because I was scared that I might be put back in the De La Salle Brothers. And but I was happy enough where I was when it came to the fact of having to lie about being paid.
And then the brothers and sisters who were living at home, there were 3 of them at home, were there?
2 brothers and a sister. Yes.
They worked on the farm as well? Like you worked
The
alongside them?
daughter didn't work on the farm. One of the boys worked on the farm. The other one was tortured with arthritis. In fact, every night I used to have to massage his knees because his knees were bent and his hands and fingers were in bad condition.
Yeah.
His whole body. He was a very strong man when he was young, but it seemed to hit him at a very early age. I think he was in his late 20s when he got really a bad bout with arthritis, and it bent the arms to a certain position that they wouldn't straighten, and the knees were bent when he would walk. In other words, he was probably 10 inches shorter than he was when he was a younger man because of the arthritis.
So in the morning you do all the milking.
All the milking.
What would you do during the rest of the day?
Well, there was crops to go in, crops to go out, livestock.
Planting, seeding.
Yeah, and then livestock to feed, and sheep to look after when in the fall. The different ones would be put in different areas with the different rams, and then in the spring, then there was the lambing. In the winter time, you had to feed them out, because we didn't have the big sheds and stuff like they were, 40 years later. But they were fed in the winter time, and then there was a farm quite a ways away from home where there would be livestock. They would have to be fed on a daily basis. So then the rest of the day you'd be picking potatoes, putting them through a sorting machine, and then hand picking them after they went through the machine, and then you would be putting them in bags and weighing them and sewing the bags and stacking them. That type of work.
Yeah.
And then there was still also, you had in the spring when you had a lot of calves in one of the buildings, you would have to clean all those out in the springtime. That was quite a chore on its own.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
Mary was saying that sometimes you would meet people your own age coming out of school, and you would.
Yeah, I would be, well, it's more of a joke today. You would ask them, questions about school and what they were learning and so on and so forth. But I would meet them when I'd be going to feed cattle. They'd be coming home from school. Yeah.
And so, what got you out of the Fitzpatricks? What prompted you to leave?
Well, it was running the dances, and we had made the comment about the ads and papers of, England and Canada and Australia, about opportunities out there and so on and so forth. So I think it was after about almost 6 or 8 months of coming home from dances and sitting talking at night in the car, would I be dropped off at the end of the lane, and we decided, well, if we have to go anywhere, we need passports. So we made arrangements, myself and one of the guys that was with me. Two brothers would be leaving me home at night, and then the oldest brother said, well, why don't we make arrangements and we'll go get passports. So we went to town, applied for a passport, and when we were in the office, which is ironic actually, he applied for an English. The girl asked, "Do you want English or Irish?" He said, "Oh, I'll have an English one," and came to me, and I said, "Oh, I'll have an Irish one." For what reason, I don't know. Maybe just because I was Irish, I decided to have an Irish passport. And anyway, it became a little difficult because I didn't have any parents, and the Fitzpatricks were reluctant to sign on the dotted line that they were my guardian. But finally they did give in, but that stalled the application for the passport for probably a couple of months before we finally, or I finally convinced them that I need this signature in order to this passport to come through. Because they, even back then there was rules and regulations that they had to know your mum and dad. And
But why did you choose Canada?
Well, it was a really good ad in the paper saying Canada, land of opportunity, and my buddy had been to England for about a year and a half, and he more or less says, well, why don't we try Canada for a change? And he had been on a bulldozer, and we more or less, when we applied to go get our tickets, I didn't have any money, so I had to borrow the money off him to get the ticket. And then when I got the job in Canada, then the first couple of paychecks I got, I paid him back on the ticket.
And what was Mrs. Fitzpatrick's reaction when she heard you were leaving?
Well, I got a bottle of holy water from her. That was her reaction. And far off fields are green, and the pound in your pocket is your best friend. Those were two of her famous statements. And I never got a nickel from the two boys. And
did they wish you well? Did
yeah.
they think you were going to succeed?
Well, I don't think there was any confidence of that whatsoever in their mind. They just didn't want me to go because I was too important to them as a servant hand. But
I remember you telling me at one point that they told you that you weren't going to mount to anything. Like did they?
Well, that was a daily basis.
What would they say to you?
They would say you're no good for nothing, and you don't have hands to scratch yourself. Yeah, you'll be no good to nobody. And I would hear that. That was a daily comment, or say every second day you're going to hear it. And it was pretty demoralizing. I can remember that. It's almost, and I don't know whether it's an Irish tradition for those statements, because even talking to my wife, she more or less has said the same thing whenever she was growing up. You were hit over the back with the broom or whatever, and told to go and do something. You're no good for nothing.
Yeah.
But that I remember quite loud and clear. In fact, it's imprinted in my brain, that demoralizing of you're no good for nothing. You don't have hands to scratch yourself. You'll never be no good to nobody, And I think they were trying to put me down to the point that I, fear in me maybe to leave. That maybe this is the truth.
So when you left, did they give you any money when you left?
No money.
So you came for Canada on with borrowed money for a ticket and no money.
And the job that I was working on.
And how did you have a job when? Like where did you fly to?
We drove to Belfast to London, London to Vancouver.
And what year was that?
1967.
Do you remember what month?
The 22nd of May, 2 days after my 23rd birthday. Yeah.
And why did you choose Vancouver?
Well, we chose Vancouver because my buddy had heard of a few of the local boys that's where they had went to, and that's the reason. We could have picked anywhere, but it was because he had heard, oh, so-and-so McGee is out, he went to Vancouver, you know, Paddy Sloan, he went to Vancouver, and that's basically the reason that we picked Vancouver. It's not that we knew anybody out in Vancouver, because we walked around the streets for a week looking for jobs, and then we got information from, you know, different people who will check this mine out and check that mine out, and then we found out where the offices were, and we'd go and put in an application there. And when we fill in the application, we were filling in applications for bulldozer operator, and I wasn't a bulldozer operator. I'd never even seen one, never mind know how to operate it, but my buddy, he had operated one in England. And lo and behold, after, well, the fifth day we had a couple of jobs, but we had it more or less discussed that we should get out to the mines. You know, they work 7 days a week out there, and that's where. And then on the sixth day, we got an interview with a mining company, and sure enough, the following day we flew out to the mine site.
Oh, where was that?
The Queen Charlotte Islands.
Oh.
Jedway iron ore, right on the very tip of the islands.
So you were mining iron ore?
Mining iron ore, open pit.
And what was the name of your friend who went to Canada with you?
Hugh Rooney.
Rooney.
Yeah.
Rooney.
That's correct. And then he, after almost 9 months out on the job, his mum, we got an emergency phone call, and his mum had passed away. So I went home with him because her and me were very close, because she told me when I was leaving to go to Canada, she says, Phil, when you come back home, make this your home. Oh. And she had four boys and 12 girls. Yeah, she was only 48 years old. Yeah. She passed on.
Yes, yeah. Yes. And but then you were determined to come back to Canada?
Well,
you just came run for a visit.
I came for a visit, and then he stayed at home and bought himself a digger and went to work. And his brother came back with me. And while we were at home, the mine had gone into the position of shutting down because of the cost of exporting iron ore and copper at the time. And then same thing again, it was almost a repeat. For about a week, his brother and I would go around the offices and keep bugging them about every second day with they had their application, put our nose in the door. Well, anything today? No, nothing today. And then after about a week, we got a job on another mine on the Queen Charlotte Islands, Tassoo, which is Falconbridge Mining Company, which Dennis knows the company quite well.
Yeah.
And we went in there, and I worked in there for 2 years. But when I was in there the first 4 or 5 months, I was oiling on a shovel, and then I became an operator, and I was getting $2.52 an hour. And then after about 3 or 4 months, I got a big jump up to $2.72, and I was from rags to richness. Mm-hmm. And then from there, myself and Brian had gone to the manager, and we'd asked to fill in an application to take over the coffee shop. And he said, well, that was strictly a married couple issue there, so I don't think we would be interested. And I never gave up. I went back about a month or 6 weeks later, and I asked him, I said, well, has anybody filled in the application? He said no. So then he granted me the permit to go run the coffee shop.
And this is in the Queen Charlotte's?
This is in the mine site.
At the mine site, I see.
Little coffee shop with hamburgers and fish and chips and cigarettes and coffee and whatever. And then a week before buying all the materials, my partner backed out because he didn't like the idea of peeling potatoes and making French fries and putting an apron on. But I went ahead anyway, and I took it over myself, and I operated that for about 15 months.
So you did that instead of mining?
No, I was still equipment operator, and this was my sideline.
Oh my God! So what time would you start in the morning?
Oh, anywhere from 16 to 18 hours a day.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So
but
you'd run the cafe in the morning and then go to work?
No, I'd be on day shift, and then I'd run the cafe in the evening from about 4 till about 10 at night. But then it started to get me down, so then I hired a married woman in the town site, and she started to look after it for me. And then I would maybe do 2 or 3 hours as well as work my 8 or 10 hour shift. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kept me out of mischief, you know.
Yeah. Yes. Oh wow.
Yeah. And then after 2 years, then I left that job because I'd heard of different other jobs all around. And I went to another site, BC Molybdenum. Didn't like the setup because I was used to the really good setup that I had in Tassou, the BC Molybdenum job. It was a mine, open pit, but it was a little haywire. Then I left.
Was it open pit where you've been working?
Yeah,
in Queen's Charlotte?
all were open pits. Then I left and went to the Yukon, another for Anvil Mine,
Oh yeah.
and worked there for a little bit over a year. And then I was on the move again. And the reason that we kind of moved, there was 10 or 12 of us kept making the moves from one job to the next. And we kind of followed one. Oh, you should come up here, you know, it's a good job here, all kinds of hours, you know.
Yeah.
So then I came through Watson Lake and filled in an application for a job.
Watson Lake, is that in Alberta or where?
No,
British Columbia?
that's in British Columbia, just on the Yukon border.
Right.
Filled in an application and drove to Vancouver, checked into the hotel, and the next morning I got a call that I got the job. Didn't even unpack. Next day, back in the car again, and drove right to Canada Tungsten. 3,300 miles. Threw my cases in the room, put on the duds, and worked a 10-hour shift.
Good God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't think of sleep.
No.
Sleep was something that I was kind of raised without.
Yes.
And I guess, you know, even on the farm, the longest I'd gone out without sleep would be 3 days when you'd be putting in the crop or taking it out or whatever. And even in Tassou, for example, backing up a second, at my longest shift on a machine loading the ore boat, 52 and a half hours on the machine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then when I went to the Northwest Territories to Canada Tungsten, I spent 4 years in there. And I left there and came back to Vancouver.
Yes.
And I more or less filled in an application. I was a member of the Operating Engineers, which is a construction union. And I got a job through them on the Mica Dam. It was a dam site, and I spent 2 years there. And then from there, I kind of drifted around, went to Fort McMurray, worked on the tar sands, went to a couple of jobs, dam jobs on the Northwest Territories, and came back to Vancouver. And then I started the first logging company, O'Connor Logging in Vancouver Island. And that was around 78, actually, the early part of 78. And I was getting married that year. And then
What date did you get married?
August the 5th, 1978. And then my mother-in-law was out in Canada, and her daughter, Mary's sister, and her brother, he was in Canada working, and they had gone to Mexico, and I was working on this job with O'Connor Logging, and they came back from Mexico, and I'd called my other brother-in-law's house and spoke to his wife, saying that when were they due back, and they said they're supposed to be back this evening. And then the next thing, Mary arrives back and is staying with her brother-in-law anyway, and phoned me up and said, "What are you doing in Vancouver?" I said, "Well, I quit." "You quit? How can you quit whenever we're getting married?" But anyway, that's a long story. And then the next thing, I got a job up back in the Charlottes again, where we are today. For 2 years went in there as the night shift charge hand. And then I rolled over after about 6 months into master mechanic's position. Worked in that job for about 3 years. And then I bought my first rubber-tired backhoe. And then it was, the rest is basically history. Got a couple of excavators, a couple of rock trucks, a couple of bulldozers, and I started into the road and bridge building business, and that's what I'm at today.
Yeah. And at the height of the business, you had how many people working for you?
24 was the peak for probably 5-6 years. Things started to take a little nosedive in the 80s, and then the big interest rates maybe came up,
Yeah.
and then we got dropped down till about 18, and that was probably a period of 6 or 8 years, and then to the present day we're right down till about 8, and as we speak now, over the last 9 months, we're down to 4 or 5 part-time jobs because of the economy and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess we have to wrap. But just tell me, what was the date when you came to see Mum, when you came to Toronto? Was it January?
January 6th, 1991.
Right.
Yeah.
And she had contacted you
In November
1990?
90, and we were to arrange to meet the following spring.
Yeah.
And whenever I sat and talked it over with Mary, and I even talked it over with her about it, Mum about it, and then I said, well, why am I going to wait till the spring?
Yeah.
Let's go now.
Let's go
And
now.
then I had said to her, well, you know, what do you do when the kids go back to school and the girls are back to work? Well, I don't do nothing. I have nothing to do. I'm basically retired now.
Yeah.
And
you
I said,
decided-
well, I'll come out and see you on the 6th of January.
Thank you, Philip.
Yeah.